American Constitution. These are Protestant and Baptist Calvinist documents. However, the Jesuits were also suppressed at the time, so there was no Jesuit order in existence at the time America was created in the providence of God, because the Jesuits were suppressed by the Pope from 1773 to 1814, and they were allowed to be revived in America in 1805 on permission of Pius VII under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. But America was created as a historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant and Baptist nation. There were 2.5 million white Protestants, there were 500,000 black slaves, and there were 30,000 Roman Catholics and 24 priests. So America was the most blessed nation in history, founded upon primarily the King James Bible. The Pilgrims came over here with Geneva, but it was the King James Bible that was printed. 30,000 copies of it were printed during the American Revolution in 1777. And that's the book that President Jackson said, sir, that book is the bedrock upon which this republic rests. So the Jesuits knew this. The Pope called the Constitution a document of Satan, and the Jesuits set out against this, what they called a missionary country, in 1801. The same year, the Jesuits had successfully set up the Masonic Lodge in Charleston, South Carolina. That would be the high-level Scottish Rite Freemasonic Lodge. The Pike would later come to rule. Well, the Jesuits incited the War of 1812 because they controlled King George III. King George III gave protection to the Jesuit order when the Jesuits were suppressed by the Pope, along with Frederick the Great and along with Catherine of Russia. So the Jesuits plotted the overthrow of America, and there's a tremendous book that's been written titled Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, written by Samuel Morse, the inventor of Morse code. And he shows how the Jesuits were plotting to overthrow our liberties, and so this is exactly what they sought to do in the War of 1812. And again, this is what they sought to do with the tariff agitation. And then finally, the Jesuits were behind, and completely behind, the anti-slavery agitation to divide the country geographically when the Jesuits had been the foremost slaveholders in the country from 1650 to 1838. So they incited the American War between the states using Freemasonry. Then they crushed the Protestant South. It was a war of annihilation against the white Protestant peoples of the South. And then on the ruins of that war, they erected an empire. And the empire that they erect, that I call in my book, is the Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, Socialist, Communist, Corporate, Fascist American Empire. From 1868 to the present, we have lived in an empire created by the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment made U.S. citizenship primary and state citizenship a privilege, whereas before you were a citizen of your state and thereby a citizen of the United States. So we have been living in an empire since 1868, a Jesuit-controlled, Masonically administered empire, and what we have done is we've fought all the wars for the Pope. We attacked the American Indians, and it was a war against the Indians for 25 years to build an empire from sea to shining sea. From there, you have Theodore Roosevelt. He becomes the first emperor, and for the entire 20th century, every war that Americans ever fought was for the benefit of the papacy. The income tax was the same income tax that was passed in the Dark Ages to finance the Crusades. So they put upon us the heavy, progressive, socialist, communist, graduated income tax to finance all these crusades and its military war machine. So America is indeed the hammer of the papacy to reduce all nations to the temporal power of the Pope. That's why American military was used to hammer the Orthodox Serbs. That's why the American military was used to aid and abet the Albanian Muslims and the Roman Catholic Croats to fight and kill the Serbian Orthodox when the Orthodox were our allies in World War II. So this empire is entirely in the hands of the papacy, and the American people are his slaves, being subject to this government created by the 14th Amendment.
We have another host named Eric Lovely, and he talks a bit about the sovereignty issue and the 14th Amendment, and what the stuff you just laid out plays right into what he talks about. It kind of gave me the goosebumps when you started talking about it. You mentioned communist socialist agenda. Why communist socialism? Why is that the preferred system? Why are they pushing that system despite the fact that it's failed throughout the world everywhere that it's been tried?
Okay, socialist communism was perfected by the Jesuits on their reductions, and their South American reductions from 1609 to 1759 for 150 years. It's there they perfected the concept of a central bank, the doctrine of universal equality between men and women, the putting everybody into workforces like a corporation or like everybody's on a ship. And the Jesuits had their fleet of black ships, whereby they put everything into international commerce and trade that the Guarani Indians had made on their reductions, and that includes the violins and so on. Communism builds corporate, fascist, monopolistic capitalism. Communism is the enemy of true laissez-faire, government hands-off capitalism. So that's why you find the huge monopolist capitalists always financing communism. It destroys the historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant middle class of the white Protestant nations. That's why England is under communism. That's why Sweden is under communism. That's why the Netherlands are communist. That's why America and Canada are communist. Communism destroys the middle class. So their preferred system is an international world government where all the nations are under socialist communism. It's a going back to the Pope's Dark Ages when all you had were the few super rich priests and nobles and the vast majority of the poor common man. That's why they've chose socialist communism. But when you have a country that is historically white and Protestant with a large Jewish population, the Jesuits have always put those countries under fascism. And once they've used the fascists to destroy the white Protestants and the Jews, the fascism precipitates the victory of communism. Fascism is never intended to win. It only facilitates the establishment of communism once the Jews are out of the way and the historic white Protestants are out of the way. And that's what I say they're putting upon us here in America. They've given us all these socialist communist outrages under Joe Biden and under the white Roman Catholic Jesuit-honored Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is really the real president. It's not the mulatto, 32nd degree Freemason Barry Davis Obama. He is just there to incite white people to fury and anger, to drive all white people into desperation and then into white fascism. That's where they're going with all of this. But the end game, once they've killed all the Jews in North America, once they have destroyed the Reformation and all Protestantism and Baptist churches in America, they will divide the country and put it under socialist communism as they did with Germany after World War II.
Amazing. And you're not the only one that's been on this program that said that. Jim Wilhelmsen said that all of these different